Hey, let me take a moment to say thank you to all the people who reached out to me. My health is good. I mean, obviously, I'm dealing with some issues, but hey, I think I'm just about over it, and I'll be back on that golf course hopefully in a couple of weeks. But it was very nice hearing from you and hearing those good, positive words. Thank you.
That was OJ Simpson only 2 months ago, and today we learned the news. Yesterday, OJ Simpson died of prostate cancer at the age of 76. Some of you may know OJ from his famous football career on the Buffalo Bills. In 1973, the Heisman Trophy winner rushed for 2,000 yards, becoming the first NFL player to rush 2,000 yards in a single season. But many know him for something else, for being charged for the brutal murder of 2 people, his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and 25-year-old Good Samaritan Ron Goldman. On June 12, 1994, the 2 were found stabbed to death outside Brown's condominium in an upscale area in Los Angeles. I've been to that murder scene. I've been inside on more than one occasion of Simpson's then home on Rockingham. I've also interviewed O.J. Simpson more than once. In fact, I think I was the first to get an interview with Simpson after his not guilty verdict. And the 11-month trial, it captivated the nation, even the world, commonly referred to as the trial of the century. Many of you might remember the Bronco car chase. It began on June 17, 1994, 5 days after the double homicide. And the slow-speed chase occurred during Game 5 of the 1994 NBA Finals. The chase mesmerized America to the point that NBC, which was broadcasting that Knicks-Rockets matchup, presented a good part of the playoff game in a split-screen format with the basketball game on the smaller box on the TV screen. The number who watched the chase was said to have been 95 million people. Some of the time, Simpson was on the phone with the police.
911, what are you reporting?
This is AC. I have OJ in the car.
Okay, where are you?
Please, I'm coming up the 5 freeway.
Okay.
Right now, we are okay, but you gotta tell the police to just back off. He's still alive, but he got a gun to his head.
Okay, hold on a minute. Monica?
He just want to see his mother. Let me get him to the house.
Okay, hold on a moment. Okay, where are you? Is everything else okay?
Everything right now is okay, officer. Everything is okay. All about he wants me to give it to his mom. He wants me to give it to his house.
Okay.
So that's all we ask. He got a gun to his head.
Okay, and what's your name?
My name is AC. You know who I am. Damn it.
Okay. All righty, sir. Hold on just a moment.
Hi, what's your name?
Oh,
Hello?
Go ahead to his mother's home and drive safely, and he'll be followed.
Simpson ultimately drove home and into his own driveway. He got out of the Bronco. He surrendered to the police. Some of you may remember this pivotal moment in the trial. That's when prosecutor Chris Darden asked the court to order Simpson to try on the leather gloves. The left-handed glove had been found outside the residence of Simpson's murdered ex-wife. The right glove was found in Simpson's yard at his home.
It's no disguise. It's no disguise. It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Fascinated the nation, and much as was broadcast for people to see, as you might imagine, so much more, though, was going on behind the scenes. There's so much going on. And we're going to tell you all about it, but we're going to take a quick break and still ahead what was going through O.J. Simpson's head during that slow-speed Bronco chase on the California highway. And if he was fleeing the police, why was he driving home? That when the record continues. No one knew Nicole Brown Simpson, O.J. Simpson, better than O.J. Simpson's sports agent, Mike Gilbert. He joins me by phone. Nice to talk to you, Mike. I know this is a tough day for many reasons for you. You've gone up and down with O.J. over the past 30, 40 years. But tell me, when you received the phone call that Nicole was dead, what was the first thing you thought?
Oh, geez. I was actually in Yosemite National Park rock climbing. I had made a quick call to my home to speak with my wife to let her know I was going to stay and climb a couple more days. And at that point, she picked up the phone and said, Mike, you need to get to Rockingham. Nicole's been murdered and OJ's in handcuffs. And I said, he can't be. He's in Chicago, because I originally was going to go to Chicago with him. And she said he's handcuffed next to Sydney's Playhouse. And of course, at that instant, the world for me changed, and the world for a lot of people.
What happened between these two?
You know, I think it was the last month leading up to June 12th, I had noticed that big switch in OJ where his mannerisms, his voice, attention to business detail was just so different. I had to call him. I remember calling him right before the 12th. I think it was on the 8th or 9th before I left for Yosemite. And he had forgotten that business deal. It wasn't a massive deal. I think it was a $100,000 deal with one of the card companies. And I would have bet money it wasn't OJ. So I asked him, I said, what year did you win the Heisman Trophy? And he responded, 1968. And I said, okay. When did you run for 2,003 yards? And he said 1973. So I had a pretty good idea it was him. But everything about him was very, very different. And I think that was because of the Prozac that he was taking in that month after he split with Nicole because of the depression.
You know, in about 1980, they're married in 1985. By 1989, he got arrested for battery. Was their relationship always a violent one?
You know, not that I had seen. That was, I remember when that incident happened and OJ explained it away, that they were very, very drunk. I think it was Christmas or New Year's Eve, if I'm not mistaken. He said, you know, people get so drunk. And of course, I believed him because I had never seen or heard anything being around them. And, you know, that would have made me think otherwise. And, you know, I thought they had a good relationship. Couples, you know, like OJ, famous couples, celebrity couples, that what you see on the outside is a lot of times is very different than what you see, you know, behind the closed doors. But behind closed doors, I thought they were pretty much crazy about each other.
The scene in the car, in the Bronco, by the way, where is the Bronco?
That Bronco we still own. It's in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, at a museum called Alcatraz East. It's been there, oh gosh, I think 7 or 8 years now. The driver in the car was AC. I spent time with AC, and I got to tell you that I've never seen anyone who was so fragile after this happened. I mean, he didn't talk much. He didn't betray OJ, but boy, he was fragile in conversation. He was very broken because he adored Nicole. OJ had been a lifelong, very close friend since junior high. And then, of course, during the Bronco chase, you know, what people don't maybe realize is originally they went to Nicole's grave, but there were police officers there, and they had parked where OJ could walk over to the grave. And the plan was he was going to commit suicide there at her grave. And there were too many cops around. He decided not to do it there. And I went back, and I think they were parked in an orchard, if I remember what OJ said. And OJ had always told me that he had pulled the trigger at one point and nothing happened. And I said, you know, which I thought was, you know, I didn't mean for it to sound flippant, but I said, did you check the safety? And he said, Mike, you know, like it was very offensive to him at that point that I said that. But the first thing I thought was the safety on. But, you know, was he really going to kill himself? I don't know. I thought he was. After the criminal trial, when he was released, before the civil case, did he show any sadness about what happened to her? And Ron Gold was a complete good Samaritan. He was just returning some glasses from a restaurant that the Nicole's family had left there. But did OJ show any sign of, like, that he was sorry or remorse? Or he continued to say he didn't do it? He continued saying he didn't do it. I know when I first headed down, I was behind the Bronco during the Bronco chase, and I was trying to call his phone, and I was leaving voicemails while the LAPD was intercepting those calls, and I got a call back from one of the detectives, and they said they were one of his neighbors. And they asked me if I really expect him to call me back. And I said, well, yeah, of course he is. I'm his agent. He'll call me back. And they said, well, you said if you need anything, and I mean anything, let me know. And they wanted to know what I meant by that. And it just, everything was happening so fast. But when he got home, I found out later, I guess there was SWAT there. And if he would have gotten out of the vehicle with the gun, they would have shot him. That's what I was told by the sheriff's department.
How about for you? I mean, you admired him, you liked him, you worked with him, you were business partners and everything. What is it like for you? I mean, when you admire someone so immensely and they do something so awful?
Oh, geez. Greta, that's the complication of a relationship and a friendship. I had loved OJ as I had, as I think I've told you before, I had 4 major idols growing up: Clint Eastwood, Muhammad Ali, OJ, and Elvis. I met all of them with the exception of Elvis, but I was lucky enough to meet Priscilla filming the Naked Gun movies. But for me, I couldn't imagine the guy that I watched playing football at USC and breaking records, and the person that was so kind to send flowers to my daughter or teach my youngest son how to play golf. I couldn't imagine that person killing someone. It was so foreign. But then I looked at the reflection of how he had changed during that month, how despondent he was. And so I thought, yeah, he could have done it. And once I went into the jail and I saw the cuts on his knuckles, I thought he did, but I feared because of the drugs he was taking, the Prozac, that he just couldn't remember. And I know at one point he said, I had a dream that I did it, but I think it was seeing what the person who committed the murder saw. And I always felt it was him, but he just couldn't see the person because it was him.
Mike Gilbert, thank you very much for joining me.
You're welcome, Greta.
Now, as you know, in 1994, in the criminal court, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of murdering his ex-wife, Nicole, and the Good Samaritan, Ron Goldman. Now, fast forward to 1997, because that's when the civil case began. Nicole Brown's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Simpson. Their lawyer was John Q. Kelly. A jury found Simpson civilly liable for the deaths. They awarded the estates of the 2 victims $33.5 million. Obviously, there's a higher burden of proof in a criminal case, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, than in a civil case, which is only a preponderance of the evidence. But nonetheless, the criminal case was missing a very important piece of evidence. A picture of O.J. Simpson 9 months before the murder wearing Bruno Magli shoes on the sidelines of a Bills game. The FBI, during their investigation, had found blood footprints at the murder scene of a pair of Bruno Magli shoes, size 12. Simpson's shoe size, but which Simpson denied owning. Simpson even denied ever owning those shoes when he was deposed after the criminal trial and before the civil trial. When asked about the shoes at the civil deposition, Simpson said, quote, that he would never wear those ugly-ass shoes, end quote. Attorney John Q. Kelly joins me. John, nice to talk to you. You were the winning lawyer in the civil case. Tell me, the shoes to me were such a significant piece of evidence. I assume you agree with me on that.
Of course I do, Greta. And the whole tenor in the courtroom changed that Monday morning after the photos came into evidence. Simpson and his attorneys sort of turned their backs on each other. They knew the end game was there. And, I'm sure Simpson had told his attorneys he'd never had a pair of shoes like that photo of him in those shoes would ever showed up. And when they did, it was just, the nail in the coffin, so to speak.
Why didn't Marcia Clark and Chris Darden use those in the criminal trial?
They didn't have them. The photos had not.
Why didn't they have them?
I don't know. They were in plain sight. They were right in the Bills bulletin. They had done a special edition honoring Simpson for his 2,000-yard season. the photos had been used in the bulletin. There were another 32 that hadn't been developed yet by E.J. Flammer, the photographer, and lo and behold, there they were.
What was it like for the family of Nicole Brown Simpson? I mean, we so often talk about the people who did something terrible, but the family, I mean, it's hard to sort of quantify the pain, but what was it like for them during the civil trial?
It was tough. I mean, they had the additional burden, not just the grief and the loss they had to deal with, but they had to sort of keep chins up and protect the two children, Sydney and Justin. I mean, they were their caretakers. The kids were living with the Browns. The Browns had to protect them from the drama and circus swirling around them, and they did a great job of it. So, you know, they couldn't really mourn or you know, wear their solemn faces around the kids. They had to give a sense of normalcy for their everyday life.
And so then, of course, then when you get the verdict against the father, the children that the family is taking care of, and because of the parents, I mean, it must be, stunning. I mean, how complex that is for the family to deal with.
Well, it was. I mean, on the one hand, during the civil case, we had the Sydney and Justin were the actual part of the estate that was bringing the action against OJ, and at the same time, we were waging a custody battle where Simpson wanted to get custody of the children back. So, you know, on the one hand, the children are being tugged and pushed and, you know, adverse to their father in the wrongful death case. On the other hand, you know, they wanted to see their father again. Their father wanted them back, at least superficially, for public purposes. So it was just sort of a lot of different current and different directions at the same time.
What was it like deposing him in advance of the civil trial? Because he gets deposition in a civil case.
He was just totally programmed. I mean, he's focused. He, you know, I'm sure he thought things through 100 times, and I think in his own mind he had convinced himself he did not convince these murderers. You know, he was just.
You know, it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because after the criminal case, and I was in his home in Rockingham in anticipation of an interview with him, listening to him, it's like he'd convinced himself that he hadn't done it. Like, you know, where did these gloves come from? Where did this blood come from? You know, I mean, it was stunning. You know, sitting there and talking to him.
Well, I think, you know, he had drank the Kool-Aid of his defense team that, you know, everything was framed, everything was, you know, plotted against him, everything was, you know, it was L.A. cops, the white L.A. cops, you know, trying to bring another black man down, and he was innocent all along, and, you know, the jury proved it.
John Q. Kelly, thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
And we'll be right back. Many people think the O.J. Simpson trial changed the course of television by allowing cameras into the courtroom. It was like watching reality TV. But it really started earlier, in 1991 in Florida, with William Kennedy Smith. Kennedy Smith, a nephew of President John F. Kennedy, was accused of raping a 29-year-old Florida woman at the Kennedy family's Palm Beach compound, who he had met in a high-end bar. At the time, Kennedy Smith was 30 years old and a member of one of America's most famous families. His trial did turn into must-see TV. Millions of viewers turned in to watch the nationally televised trial. And then, in December 1991, after only 77 minutes of deliberating, the jury found Kennedy Smith not guilty of all charges. And then 3 years later, the O.J. Simpson trial gained national attention. Around 100 million viewers had their eyes glued to the TV to see what was going to happen next. On your screen was one of the most watched moments in the case. It is O.J. Simpson's white Bronco leading police on a 2-hour slow-speed car chase. The driver of that Ford Bronco was Simpson's boyhood friend, Al A.C. Collins. Helicopters provided nonstop video of the Bronco making its way on the 405. Simpson's Bronco was trailed by a dozen-plus police cars. From what Simpson was saying to police on the phone during the drive, suicide did seem a real possibility. Simpson, of course, was then arrested and tried. The not guilty verdict was returned on October 3, 1995, to a TV audience of about 150 million people. Now compare that to the 25 million less viewers at this year's Super Bowl. Former California prosecutor Kimberly Guilfoyle joins me. Kimberly, nice to see you. You prosecute cases in the state of California, including high-profile cases, a dog mauling case, which I was an analyst on. You were trying. What's the impact, you think, of cameras on the courtroom in these high-profile cases?
You know, it's so interesting, Greta. You did a nice job in the setup there. It's funny because I remember exactly where I was when I was watching this. I was in the last year of law school, and I ended up then going to the San Francisco DA's office, and all of my law school roommates, we were all sitting around watching this. I then went from San Francisco to the Los Angeles District Attorney's office, and I had always wanted to be a prosecutor. I ended up trying the dog mauling case, the famous second-degree implied malice precedent-setting case that I co-chaired. On the criminal courts building, downtown Los Angeles, the same floor as the OJ Simpson case, high security. And then I went on to Court TV, where, of course, we flourished with cameras in the courtroom. And whether it was, you know, the Lacey Peterson case or the Michael Jackson case, the OJ case, it really forever changed the trajectory of how we viewed the legal system. It was real-life law and order, opening the doors to the courtroom, to witness prep, to statements, to closing arguments, to the handling of evidence, exposing the whole world to how we take care of, take into custody, and analyze forensic evidence. So it's quite fascinating to see what's happened here. And of course, you know, the profound disappointment, you know, as a former prosecutor, and just knowing, you know, the facts and the evidence, circumstantial as well, it was very powerful, which carries the same weight as direct evidence in a court of law, with a disappointing verdict in the criminal trial. But justice delayed was not justice denied in the civil verdict, as you know.
Well, and of course, in the Constitution provides for a public trial. I mean, people long ago, 200 years ago, you know, people go down to the town square and watch them, so it's not particularly unusual. But a thing that always struck me about this trial is this, is that we viewers saw a completely different trial than the jury. The jury was sequestered, and every time there's a battle over whether some evidence was admissible or not, the jury get tossed out of the room, of course, and then we'd all hear the evidence. And then maybe the judge ruled that it wasn't admissible. And this goes on for over a year. And so we viewers actually watched a completely different trial than what the jurors were exposed to.
Well, you know, that's a fair statement. I think one of the fatal flaws in this case, because I did go on to serve under Gil Garcetti, it was very interesting trying cases downtown. A lot of people were very just, you know, really just disabused with the whole idea of law enforcement not trusting cases, narcotics cases, all of the above for the handling of evidence. But I'll tell you something. It's the change of venue. In this case, you know, I think it was a choice of venue, very important. They tried that downtown criminal courts building. They made a calculated decision that backfired. And you had John Q. Kelly on. He decided to try it where the case actually occurred, in that forum in Santa Monica, which had a very different jury pool and produced a very different outcome, which I thought was very interesting.
We talk about the distrust of the police. I think you've got to look sort of historically at this. That prior to this trial, you had something called the Christopher Commission, which, and prior to that was because of Rodney King. When we all saw Rodney King get clobbered over the head a number of times, and so there was a great distrust of police in California. So they had this commission to talk about whether there's police abuse. So when the jury comes into the courtroom and gets instructed, the judge says you apply your common sense. Some communities, your common sense are cops take cats out of trees. Some places your common sense is cops, you know, roll people and stick drugs on them. So I mean, so there are so many interesting dynamics to this trial.
It's really true. I just still, you know, having tried cases all over Los Angeles County, I wouldn't have picked that. They really misjudged, you know, the demographic and thinking what was going to happen there. And it was quite different in Santa Monica. People always ask me, why are you an undefeated prosecutor? I said, because I pick great juries that do actually have common sense. You really have to be careful if people have predispositions, and in jury voir dire, really drill down on that to see if there's anything that's happened with them, with a family member in their community that would produce inherent distrust in law enforcement. And if your case is largely based on law enforcement and police involvement, then you better make sure that you have 12 people that are going to give it a fair shake and look at the facts and the evidence, you know, honestly. And I think it was just a shame, you know, what happened. My heart goes out to the families of the victims in this case. And I just want to point something out. You know, Greta, you saw the White House today under Biden, his press secretary, you know, talk about OJ Simpson, honoring him, never making any mention of the victims. And by the way, say her name named Laken Riley. Look at the juxtaposition. They never brought up this poor girl that was murdered, and you just see they're glorifying someone who committed a heinous homicide, a double homicide, and, you know, they can't even honor a young woman that was, you know, brutally murdered.
Yeah, we didn't get to some. One thing I would like to talk to maybe next time is about how the prosecutor is sort of a dual role. You try your case during the day, and then you need to talk to the victims' families at night to try to explain what happened. Maybe next time. Kimberly Guilfoyle, thank you for joining me.
Comforting, yeah. My pleasure, my friend.
I made such a good friend covering the Simpson trial. We still have lunch together all these years. We still swap stories. We still laugh. We laughed this afternoon. My friend is Roger Cossack. I learned from him all about California law. He was a California lawyer. And then we ended up, after the trial that we covered together, we worked for CNN being co-hosts on the then CNN show Burden of Proof. By the way, still have one of the show mugs, but it's pretty faded. You can hardly read Burden of Proof. Roger joins me. Nice to see you, Roger.
My pleasure, Greta. My pleasure.
Oh, okay, Roger, you got to come home soon. But anyway, so you're out in California right now. All right, Roger, tell me, why was that trial so bizarre to cover? It was really odd.
Well, Greta, you know, you had tried a lot of cases in your time, too, out in the D.C. area, and so you knew what criminal trials were all about, and we both agreed that this was the strangest case, first of all, in just, if nothing, but the speed at which it got to trial. Remember, Greta, it was 2 or 3 weeks before they had a preliminary hearing. That never happens. The trial was in, I think, within 6 months or 5 months even. It was very, very quick, and I thought that was a brilliant move by the defense because I never thought the prosecution was perhaps as ready as they should have been. But it was a crazy trial because it captured the imagination of the country. You remember that, Greta? All of a sudden, we had a tiger by the tail. And everyone wanted to know about this. And that was what it was.
But it was so interesting for me to work with you because the people involved were like Johnny Cochran, Alan Dershowitz, F. Lee Bailey, Robert Shapiro, Robert Kardashian, who is the father of the Kardashian girls. They're not girls anymore. I mean, it was the most unusual collection of people.
And just to say a little footnote history for us, do you remember with the first show we ever did, A Burden of Proof, you remember Johnny Cochran came on and was our first host. He had just finished arguing the closing argument, and he came on that night for our show, and it was really a spectacular
Well, actually,
evening.
let me dig a little deeper on that, though. The reason why he came on for our show is because he promised you, and Johnny was good for his word. So, I mean, you booked him. He promised you, and he kept his word. I always liked Johnny Cochran. He made everybody in the room feel important.
You know, he was a terrific guy and a terrific lawyer. You might have feelings about what happened in the OJ Simpson case. I certainly understand that and what role he played. But as a lawyer, you had to admire that he went and he defended his client, and he did exactly what lawyers should do, and was able to convince the jury that the prosecution didn't prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. But besides that, he was a wonderful man, a charitable man, a gracious man, and a great man.
Well, but then a horrible feud between Shapiro and F. Lee Bailey. They were best friends going into the trial, and by the end, you had one of them testifying against the other one, trying to put him in jail in Florida.
Well, I think when you have two people who view life through their prism of importance and greatness, and certainly I've known Robert Shapiro, most of my life, and like him, and think he's a terrific guy. And F. Lee Bailey, we knew that the importance that he had in the legal community, but it was, two guys. There wasn't enough room on the stage for both of them, and they bounced. And you and I have both seen that happen.
All right, now let me turn to the prosecution a little bit. I remember that Marcia Clark would walk into restaurants and she'd get a standing ovation in California. I mean, it was so glittery in Hollywood. I've teased you about Hollywood a million times, but it was so glittery.
Well, it did, this suddenly, here you and I are, and suddenly we're on television and we're describing for the world this O.J. Simpson case, which, because of O.J. Simpson and because of the facts of the case, captured the imagination of not just America, but the world. And so, you know, suddenly lawyers were stars. You know, we toiled as lawyers. Nobody knew who we were. But now, because of television and because of, you know, the millions and millions of people that were watching that, you know, people would come in. And as you know, people picked sides. You know, Marcia Clark was for the prosecution. I don't think I'm being hesitant in saying that 99% of the people or 90% of the people believed and still believe that O.J. Simpson was guilty, and she was the one that was going to, you know, put him in jail. So, you know, she was a celebrity. The defense was a celebrity. It was just an amazing time.
All right, Roger, come on home. I know you're due back here May 1st for lunch. Thank you. Well, I look forward to you coming back east. Thank you, Roger.
All right, see you soon.
Attorney Gloria Allred joins me. She represented murder victim Nicole Brown Simpson in the 1995 criminal trial of O.J. Simpson and the family. Nice to see you, Gloria. Gloria, you know, in terms of what you were doing in this trial, is that in some way you were really helping the prosecution because you were trying to take care of the family. But what did you tell the family day after day after day as they sat and listened to this?
Yeah, and the family, especially Lou and Juditha, the parents of Nicole Brown Simpson, may she rest in peace, and also the sisters of Nicole Brown Simpson, Denise and Dominique and Tanya, you know, were misrepresented in the press. And in addition to that, there were a lot of false statements being circulated about them, rumors, attacks on them. I guess part of that might have been from some of the Simpson supporters who tried to divert attention from the misconduct of O.J. Simpson and try to put the family on trial, the victim's family, because they're victim, of course, instead of O.J. Simpson, the defendant. Also, you know, they wanted me to speak out on behalf of victims of domestic violence because Nicole was a victim 5 years before Mr. Simpson, the defendant, the killer, I'll call him, actually almost decapitated her and left her in a pool of blood on the doorstep of the condominium which she was living with their young children. 5 years before that, he actually beat her, gave her a black eye. We've seen that photo of her with a black eye. She ran from their home together, hid in the bushes. He was charged with spousal battery. He entered a plea of no contest to spousal battery. And guess what, Greta? The judge didn't give him 1 day in jail for beating his wife. And so I think, you know, that's very important because he became emboldened. He became empowered. And then he did the ultimate act of violence against a woman. He killed her. And that should never be forgotten, that the justice system failed women, failed a victim.
But Gloria, they were lucky they had you as a voice. I used to see Fred Goldman and his daughter in that courtroom, and they almost they didn't they didn't have what the Simpson what Nicole's family has, and the grief that you could see in that family. I mean, it's just like, you know, it's unthinkable what in the pain that they went through, and we're very sort of clinical, talking about evidence and constitutional rights and everything, but there's such a human side to this and the suffering that that those two likewise had.
It's just almost unimaginable what they suffered. And they were so close to Nicole. And they were very close to their niece and nephew, Sydney and Justin. And in fact, when Mr. Simpson was incarcerated in custody awaiting his criminal trial, it was the family of Nicole Brown Simpson, namely the grandparents and the sisters, who essentially took custody of Sydney and Justin, who were very young at that time, and loved them and cared for them and tried to protect them during this time. And then, of course, when Mr. Simpson was acquitted by the criminal jury, there was a fight by Mr. Simpson to regain custody of the children. And that was a terrible, ugly fight. And it was heartbreaking to the grandparents and also to the nieces.
Gloria Allred, thank you. Always nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Joining me is Jim Murray, who spearheaded the CNN coverage of the O.J. Simpson trial. He's currently chief correspondent for Inside Edition. Here's a little secret. Roger Cossack and I used to always sort of laugh because, Jim, you never made a mistake on the air. And we used to always laugh and say, how does he do it? Well, we used to laugh at you like, because you're Mr. Perfect. Anyway, what are your thoughts looking back at this trial?
Gloria Allred reminds us who we really should be thinking about, and that's the victims in this case. But I look at that trial through a couple of lenses. One, I look at it, not to be tongue-in-cheek, I look at it as the first reality show, the show that really set the tone for crime coverage, for this true crime type of coverage, because it's all the nation could talk about for over a year. For the 9 months during the civil case, and then the several months during the criminal case, and then the civil case. And I was really struck by how many people had an opinion about this. And it highlighted the racial divide in this country. It highlighted the difference between celebrity and non-celebrity, rich and poor. It was a pivotal moment that I don't think could ever be repeated, frankly, Greta.
You know what, though, I thought was sort of important, important aspect to it is that after this trial, and Barry Scheck, who's one of the lawyers, the DNA lawyer for the defense, there were so many requests coming out of prisons for people who said they were innocent for DNA tests, and indeed they were innocent. I forgot how many people were on death row or whatever, but before it really put the spotlight on this, basically this new technology, DNA, and prosecutors were forced in the position of having to test either you're guilty or not guilty, or DNA is there or not. And so in that way, it really also had that impact on the criminal justice system.
I don't think, however, the DNA is what set O.J. Simpson free. I think it was an issue of trust with the police. But I agree with you. It was a major moment for DNA and a breakthrough in terms of educating the public about what could be used to exonerate or implicate somebody.
But a lot of people think that that this was an all-black jury. It was not an all-black jury. It was 8 blacks, 2 Hispanics, 1 Native American / Caucasian, and 1 Caucasian. But everybody thinks, people will say that it was an all-black jury. It just wasn't.
I agree with you. However, the female African American juror was perceived to be the most friendly to O.J. Simpson, and I think that the jury consultants said that in the beginning to both the prosecution and the defense. The defense latched onto it. The prosecutor said, we don't care about that. We're going to win over this jury anyway. I think that the prosecutors outsmarted themselves. I think the iconic glove incident was a pivotal moment in this case. There was a time, I think, where the prosecutors lost the trust of the jurors. And Greta, you've tried to.
But you know what? If they hadn't put the glove on O.J. Simpson, I bet my right arm that Johnny Cochran would have stood up and said, and put the glove on O.J. Simpson, done the same sort of display. Then he would have pointed at Marcia Clark in the closing arguments and say, why didn't she do that? Because she didn't want you to know. I actually think, they were really they're boxed in. What they don't know, I grew up in Wisconsin, is that gloves that get wet, they shrink. And you put it over latex, and you're going to have even more problems. And O.J. Simpson had gained weight. But they walked right into that one.
And you also had O.J. Simpson controlling the evidence, and he was basically testifying without the need to be cross-examined.
Indeed. Judge Ito, looking back at how he presided over this trial, what are your thoughts?
I think he really tried his best. I think he was overwhelmed by the amount of press coverage. I don't think anybody saw this coming. It was the first and biggest case of its type. Look, this is before social media, Greta. We were on at CNN, gavel to gavel. CNN and Court TV, gavel to gavel. The nation was watching this trial live. That hadn't really happened before. We had Watergate coverage, but this thing, there were 90 million people who saw that low-speed chase and 150 million who saw the verdict. And you have that kind of spotlight. I think Judge Ito did the best he could. I respect him a great deal.
Kato Kaelin, we've got to talk about him. He was living on the house, and
Right.
What a character he is from my home state.
He was a character I've spoken to many times since, and I like Kato. It's hard not to like Kato.
I like Kato. I mean, you can't not like Kato Kaelin. You cannot.
I agree with
Kato Kaelin is very likable.
Very likable, and I think he was terrified, frankly, to be on that stand, and I think he was nervous. I think he always believed O.J. Simpson was responsible. He was afraid to say it for whatever reason, but you're right. I mean, you see him there. Oh my gosh! I mean, we've all gotten older. That's all I can tell you.
And did we have, I mean, who would have guessed this? I mean, all these years long, people are still fascinated. I mean, that's all anybody talked about today was in OJ Simpson. And I've always sort of quipped that it's going to be on my tombstone.
And there's a sense of justice denied, I think, with this case. You know, somebody asked me what his legacy is. I don't think it's going to be as a football player. I really don't.
I don't either, but I think that the Las Vegas conviction may have been a partial payment plan. Jim Murray, always nice to see you. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Okay.
Coming up, what is the White House saying about OJ Simpson's death? I'm going to tell you, and the record continues after this. Earlier today, the White House forgot something, but we are not going to. First, here's the clip.
I'll say this, our thoughts are with his families during this difficult time, obviously with his family and loved ones. And I'll say this, I know that they have asked for some privacy, and so we're going to respect that. I'll just leave it there.
Today it has been wall-to-wall coverage of Simpson's death, but we need to stop and remember, 2 innocent people were knifed to death. Earlier today, after many years, I spoke to Fred Goldman, Ron's father. I could still hear the loss in Fred's voice all these years later. Fred said that Simpson's death is an ugly reminder how long his son has been gone. His son was just a good Samaritan, doing a favor, returning some glasses that were left at the restaurant where he was a waiter. Fred also told me that he never felt they were able to fully hold Simpson accountable, which is a sentiment I've heard over the years from so many victims' families. And it's like this. One day, all is fine. The next, your life is turned upside down forever, like theirs.